I'm often asked who my favorite radio guests have been over the years, and there's a couple that immediately spring to mind. Certainly John Gotti Jr., Bob Barker, and several others, Joe Franklin naturally. But whenever I make my list of my favorite interviews ever, the person I have to put at the top of my list also happens to be one of my favorite politicians in the United States of America. I wish he was still in elective office, and somebody that I have just an incredible amount of admiration for. That's why I'm blown away to be here in Las Vegas and be able to have the opportunity to sit down with the former mayor of Las Vegas and the current first man, Oscar Goodman. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for squeezing me into your schedule.
Well, it's great having you here. I know that you came during a good time of year. We have the rodeo out here now and beautiful weather, so you're going to have a ball here in Las Vegas.
And the weather's a lot better than it is in New York right now.
I know that. We're lucky. We have a very interesting phase coming through here of warmth at this time of year. Usually it's pretty chilly, but it's real nice now.
Now, I want to delve into a couple of the stories you talk about in your book, which if people haven't read, it's a couple of years old, but I've actually read it twice, and it's not only incredibly informative, but it's pretty engaging. It's called Being Oscar, From Mob Lawyer to Mayor of Las Vegas, Only in America. Now, the first thing, I asked you about this before, but people are so curious, at least I was, that you almost embrace the title of mob lawyer. I talk with a lot of lawyers who are known as quote-unquote mob lawyers, and they say, no. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I've happened to have a lot of clients that have been involved in organized crime. You embrace it. Why?
Well, I did, because I was not their consigliere. That's number one. If it was a consigliere, I'd probably not talk about it, but I was their lawyer. And, I considered it an honor because they could have used any lawyer in the United States. They could have paid the very substantial fees that I charged to any other lawyer in the United States. And they provided me with the opportunity to have the best cases of the time, of the day. And there's no reason that I shouldn't tell the truth. They were reputed mobsters.
The ethical question that every criminal defense attorney gets is, hey, if you do your job well, the result is you're helping people that have committed murder, that have been accused of dealing drugs, or sometimes even more heinous crimes. You're helping them get out of prison. Is it difficult?
No, I'm trying to keep them from going to prison.
Right.
Well, what I'm doing is basically, it's very simple. I didn't have one sleepless night. I represented these people virtually in a consistent manner. I made sure that the Constitution was being upheld by the government in their quest to put my client behind bars. Number two, I made sure they weren't engaged in prosecutorial misconduct, which would have been unacceptable in this country. So the two things that I was trying to do, most of the time I was successful. And therefore, I don't have any problem with if the result was that the jury finds that law enforcement violated the law, violated the Constitution, they're not entitled to a verdict of guilty.
One of the things that you say in your book is you came across people that have lied, cheated, and tried to bend the system every which way, and those, almost without exception, were prosecutors and law enforcement.
That is correct.
People grow up in this country with the notion that if you're arrested, if you're indicted, you're probably a bad guy. If you're the one doing the arresting, you're probably a good guy.
I think that's changing.
It certainly is.
And I wish I wasn't prescient when I made that statement in the book. I wasn't trying to predict what the future would be. But there's no question in my mind that now with, I guess, social media, with everybody having their little selfie camera, they're catching those who are already charged with the responsibility of holding the law with violating the law.
So you've represented guys with some pretty tough reputations, and you say more often than not you got the feeling that they were the good guys.
Well, they were always good with me. Where was their bond? They always said thank you. They always said please. They treated my office staff with respect. I never got that same kind of treatment from many people who were with the federal government in particular.
You didn't grow up in Las Vegas. I don't think anyone grew up in Las Vegas.
Well, my children grew up in Las Vegas.
You grew up in Philadelphia.
That's correct.
Your dad was actually, and maybe he was the black sheep of the family now, he was a prosecutor.
No, he was a legitimate prosecutor. He would never engage in these kind of tactics that I'm critical of. Basically, your state prosecutors are pretty good as a general proposition. It was the federal prosecutors, in particular, the strike force, the organized crime prosecutors who would come out from Washington, D.C. and fan themselves around the country. They're the ones who really were very, very abusive and played very, very loosely as far as people's rights were concerned.
I know that you're not in that line of work anymore, but I know you probably follow these sorts of cases. Does the federal government, does the Justice Department, the FBI, do they still behave in such a manner?
I can't tell you because I haven't been actively practicing for at least a decade now. Since I was elected the mayor, I sort of put that in the background. I have two sons, one's a judge, one's a lawyer, and I leave the clients to them. But I can't tell you whether it's the same breed of cat. All I can tell you is I was on a panel, and some of the FBI agents who were back in the day were on the panel with me, and they were telling the same lies today that they did back then.
Now, that's not the real reason, though, that you left Philadelphia to come to Las Vegas. What brought you out here?
You know, I was when I was in law school, I didn't like law school. Law school was boring to me. It was a time when most of the fellows and ladies in my class were interested in going into corporate law. That didn't interest me. I was a civil libertarian. I liked it. Was the time of the civil rights movement, and I was interested in individual rights, and they just weren't teaching enough of that for me. So one day I walked downtown from the law school in Philadelphia, from Penn Law to the City Hall, and I went in, and Cole didn't know us all. I said, is there a job for a guy like me? And they said, well, go see Arlen Specter. Specter, who became a United States Senator for many, many years. He had just won the first conviction of a Teamster official in the United States, and he said, well, I could use a clerk. I said, that's great, and he hired me. I worked a 40-hour week while I was going to law school at $1 an hour. It's the best job I ever had. Well, a wealthy widow gets killed, and two fellas who killed her came out to Las Vegas, and they took $300,000 from her mattress, which they were laundering at the crap table. And they were arrested and searched, and when they were brought back to Philadelphia for trial, I was assigned the responsibility of going over the testimony of the arresting officers from Las Vegas, and it was a cold, dreary, rotten night, and the wind was just roaring right through the City Hall in Philadelphia, and these two officers said, what are you doing here? I said, where else is there? They said, the land of milk and honey. So I went home that night, and I said to my wife, sweetheart, I woke her up. I said, how would you like to go to the land of milk and honey? She says, I'm not going to Israel. I refused to go to Israel. I said, no, Las Vegas. And it was that simple.
Your dad was a very well-respected prosecutor.
Yes,
he was a very well-respected attorney in private practice.
Yes.
He never became a judge. He was a prominent Republican and was a longtime supporter of Republican politics in Pennsylvania. How come he never became a judge?
You know, that's the thing that sort of was heartbreaking to me, and perhaps to him as well. I always said that my dad would have lived a lot longer had he not been as righteous as he was. He felt that he had earned the position of a judgeship, a federal judgeship. It doesn't work that way, and he was perhaps naive in that respect. But they said you have to pay for it. He said, wait a second. I worked very hard for the party. I have a good reputation. I know the law. I think I make an excellent judge. They said, no, you have to come up. I forget whether it was $10,000 or $25,000. He said, no way. And that was the end of it. And I resented the whole system after that because I believe in a meritocracy. I believe that people, when they do things, they should be rewarded for it if they are doing the right thing, if they're excelling in righteousness, so to speak. And in effect, that broke his heart.
Oh, I can imagine.
It broke my heart, too. And maybe that's what made me into the kind of lawyer that I became, because I really did not like the government. I really didn't like them.
I want to ask you about your impetus to become a quote-unquote mob lawyer in a second. If people are just tuning in, we're talking with former mayor of Las Vegas, Oscar Goodman. He's the current first man in Las Vegas. He's got a number of other titles, which we'll delve into in a moment. He's also the author of the book Being Oscar, which is as good a read today as it is when it came out a couple of years ago. But there's one secret code that many friends of mine refuse to violate. I'm not talking about omerta, which gets violated all the time these days, but every friend of mine who's a lawyer refuses in more than a whispered tone to admit what a waste of time the third year of law school is. But you come right out and say it.
It's a complete waste of time. I mean, you learn all of your research the first year. You learn how to get into the intricacies of the law the second year. The third year, you can't wait to get out and get a job and start making a living. It's that simple.
It's
it's a waste of time.
I give you a lot of credit for
no, you tell the truth. It
that.
is a waste of time. Now, of course, the dean of the law school will take offense at that, but that's his prerogative. I went, okay? I know that it was a waste of time.
One case of your father's, which kind of parallels, interestingly enough, with an early case that you had to do with a Holocaust victim.
Yes.
One that he was representing, and then, I'm wondering if you tell that story,
Yes.
and then tell the story of one of your early cases.
Well, my dad would take me to court with him on Sundays. Before we went off to Sunday school, we would stop off and have a little breakfast at Horn and Harders. I don't even know whether they have those anymore. They were automats where you put a nickel in or a quarter in and you got your food. And then he would take me over to the police station and he would handle arraignments. And then he'd drop us off at the Sunday school. And, but one day he says, how would you like to go to City Hall with me? I have a very interesting case. I said, what is it, Dad? And he said, I'm representing a woman who was a victim of the Holocaust. And while she was in the concentration camp, she had a tattoo placed on her wrist. She barely made it out, and she came to this country, and she would have nightmares about what she had to face when she was interred. And he said she wants to have a lobotomy. Oh. No, she fought against a lobotomy that her family wanted her to have. They wanted her to have a portion of her brain cut out. Very similar to what happened with the Kennedy, President Kennedy's sister, where they cut out a portion of the brain which stores memory, because they said if we do that, then she won't have these horrible nightmares and these terrible after effects from her experience while she was in the concentration camp. And the woman hired my father, and she said, I don't want to forget. I want to remember forever. I look at my wrist. What are they going to do? Chop my wrist off? And he fought for her, and I was in court when he made his argument, and it was awesome. I mean, it was what this.
And he won that case.
Yes, it's what this country was all about. That people can do what they want as long as they're not hurting somebody else, and people can't tell you what to do in your best interest unless a court can say that you're entitled to a due process before that happens.
Interestingly enough, one of your early cases as a criminal lawyer involves somebody that killed a Holocaust survivor.
That is absolutely true. They're not killed in the sense that he went out and murdered anybody, but he was a young man. I don't think he was more than 21 at the time. He was a barber, my barber. And he left the barber shop about 6 o'clock one evening after cleaning up and was driving down the street. He had nothing to drink. He had no drugs. He was not that kind of person, just a hardworking young man. And a woman steps off the curb while she's holding the hand of her grandchild. And he hits her. And he panics. He's scared to death. He's never done anything wrong. And this happened to him. So he drove a couple of blocks, went into a 7-Eleven, got on the phone, called his dad, and said, what should I do, Dad? What should I do? And the father said, go back to the scene. Well, he goes back to her and says, I'm the one who hit this woman. What happened to her? And unfortunately, she virtually died at the spot where she was hit. No crosswalker or anything, but this guy was just devastated by it, and he was so distraught, and they charged him with manslaughter and leaving the scene of an accident. Well, I was able to get the manslaughter charge dismissed. And we were left with the fact that he left the scene of an accident. And there's no sense doing anything other when you're in that kind of spot than to fess up, to say how sorry you are, how it's affected your life, how you accept responsibility for it, all the things that the system wants to hear. And he goes through all of that. And the kid's heartbroken. I mean, he's heartbroken. He never meant to hurt anybody in his life. And the family of the decedent, of the woman who was killed by my client's car, were insisting that he get prison time. And they were saying, what this guy did to my mother, Hitler couldn't do.
Oh, boy.
I got chills when I heard it, and I panicked. I mean, inside I didn't show it visibly to anybody who was there. And I was scared that the judge was going to send this young man to prison when it was an accident. You know, sometimes in life there are accidents, and an accident is an accident. You don't punish somebody for an accident. Maybe you do in a civil court and you get monetary damages. Maybe that's appropriate, but you don't send somebody like this kid to prison. And thank God I made an argument to the judge, and I'm not telling you I didn't know the judge. The judge was a righteous guy, a good man, and he gave my client probation. And it could have been a disaster, but it's interesting how the two Holocaust stories play against one another.
You've been so generous with your time already. There's a couple other areas that I just want to delve in with you. You talk about when you're representing all these reputed mobsters, you were never the in-house counsel of the Colombo crime family. You were never went to law school on a mob scholarship. You became a mob lawyer quite by accident.
Well, it was a complete accident. When I came out here, my wife and myself arrived with $87 in our collective pockets. Now, a lot of people write books and they say that I was sent out by the mob. Well, the mob would treat me better, believe me, if I was sent out by the mob. And I got a job, and then my wife got another job with one of the hotels here in advertising and publicity, and the two of us were able to have a little bit of money. My dad was very nice. He sent us a wonderful gift of $25 a week that had to be spent by us on entertainment. It couldn't be on necessities. And I would take my wife out to a hotel for a nice meal. It's a hacienda. It's no longer here. It's been imploded. And my wife was one of the first card counters that I ever came upon. She didn't know she was a card counter. They didn't even talk about card counters because I used to represent the big card counters too, Kenny Houston and that whole group. But she was able to play cards and win, believe it or not, at 21. And I would stand behind her while she was playing after dinner. She would bet $10 for the whole night. But she would, if she won 10, she'd put it in her purse and we'd leave. And she was happy, I was happy. Well, the fella who was the dealer and myself became friendly because we were talking to each other. It was a different kind of town then where it wasn't as formal as it is today. And he calls me up one day and he says he had a financial setback. He'd like to file a bankruptcy. I had a little law office over a flower shop. I had a little bridge table that I used as my desk. He came down. We filled out the bankruptcy forms. I think I charged him $250, including the cost. He was happy. I was happy. Then one day, shortly thereafter, a phone call comes into the pit of the hacienda. And the phone call is from a mobster from the Northeast whose stepbrother had been arrested out here for a Dyer Act, which is the transportation of a vehicle across state lines. Very simple crime for the federal government to prove. And he calls up the pit and he says, this is so-and-so. Who's the best criminal lawyer in Las Vegas? So nothing's changed over all these years.
You admit that, you early on at this point, very impressed by the lifestyle that these mobsters live.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everybody, they had these more than the glamour, they had these big wads of green hundreds that they had all the time. They went to the best restaurants and bars. They had beautiful women around them wearing beautiful fur coats and jewelry, which was just dripping off of them. They were betting ball games. I mean, life was good.
But your wife cautions you when you
did.
Start getting involved with these guys. And your wife, Carolyn, who is the current mayor of Las Vegas, she's doing a great job.
She is doing a great job, and it's the first time in the history of this country that a mayor swore in a spouse to succeed them.
Well, I can imagine that makes criticizing your successor pretty difficult in public. But she tells you, don't become your client.
Exactly.
What was she afraid of?
What she was saying there was for a lot of different reasons. One, she wanted my clients to respect me. And the only way they're going to really respect me is if the courts respected me. And if the courts saw me as like my clients, they wouldn't treat me with respect because they didn't like my clients. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but it's a fact. But I tried to be professional with them. I saw too many lawyers who would become their clients. They would go out to lunch. They'd start with the martinis. Now, right now, as far as I'm concerned, it's 9 o'clock somewhere. I'll start drinking at 9 o'clock in the morning. I could care less. But in those days, I wouldn't drink until I got through with the day's work. It was very important that the clients knew that I was not one of them, that I was their lawyer, and that I was respected, and I was going to fight as hard as I could fight to make sure that their rights were protected. If at any time they felt that I was faltering there, my practice could have come to a screeching halt.
I could talk with you about each of your cases for an hour, but this is the last one I'm going to ask you about. One of your early cases, you're representing people in a broad federal indictment in many different cities, right?
Yes.
And you had already at this point, a couple decades ago, gotten this reputation as the guy. If there are wiretaps, which is a fairly new law enforcement tool at the time, how prevalent it was.
Right, it went into effect in 1964.
You were the guy, the wiretap guy. So all these guys that had wiretap cases that involved their conversations being recorded all over the country.
Which were most of them.
Right. They hired you.
Right.
And you noticed something very odd about what the federal law enforcement authorities were doing. Tell the public what the Attorney General and the top deputies of the Justice Department were doing.
Okay, well, this is very interesting. I'm not going to take credit for this. I'm very fortunate because I was hired to represent 19 different clients from 19 different cities in a raid that took place in 26 different cities around the United States. And in each one of those cities, there was a wiretap placed on a phone. And in order for a wiretap to have been legal, either the Attorney General of the United States, who at that time was John N. Mitchell, or one of 9 assistant Attorney Generals, the Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division, Attorney General in charge of the Civil Division, the Civil Rights Division. Only one of those 10 people were authorized by way of the statute to say that it was okay to do the wiretap. And I'm in a hotel room, and I have all of my 19 cases spread around because when I wasn't in court, I'm working on all the cases to file the motions. And one of my clients says, Oscar, I got to show this to you. And I said, don't bother me. I'm busy working. No, I got to show this to you. I said, look, let me finish what I'm doing. I'm happy to talk to you. He said, no, you got to see this. Well, the name Will Wilson was on the authorizations. Will Wilson was the Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Criminal Division. And had he authorized that, it would not raise any kind of legal point. But the handwriting was different. And I said, there's something wrong here. And I was able to take the deposition of John Mitchell. I had the attorney...
Nixon strongman, the guy with the pipe.
I had the Attorney General of the United States sitting in my law office, asking him questions. And he was arrogant, and he was smug. And maybe God punished him by having him married to Martha Mitchell, who was a piece of work herself. And he finally said, look, I didn't authorize these, and that's not my signature. And then I brought Will Wilson in, and it turns out that nobody who, under the statute, could have authorized it did. It was signed by an executive secretary by the name of Saul Lindenbaum. I went to court. I won all 19 cases. And from that point on, even though it was a lucky break, we were able to catch it. Had I just had one client, would have never known the difference because the signature would have looked legit.
It's amazing to me that all these top prosecutors, the top prosecutors in the country, could forge one another's signatures and have no problem with documents going out with their own forged signature, and there's no penalty whatsoever for these guys.
See, that's the thing that bothers me still to this day. Or you hit it right on the nose. I've been in cases where I catch people in lies. I catch agents. I caught police officers. I caught prosecutors in lies under oath, where they raise their hand, they say, I swear to God to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. And they lie through their teeth, and I catch them in the lie, and the judge dismisses the case or throws out the case or suppresses the evidence, and these people walk away.
Shrug their shoulders.
Without even a letter in their file, and what happens is the next time they engage in this kind of activity, maybe they're not going to be caught, and they're going to be able to get away with it. And that's what used to ate me to the core, and that's what kept me going, because it was so unacceptable to me, and I felt that what I was doing was more important than what the prosecutor was doing, trying to put my client behind bars when the government is violating its own laws.
Unbelievable. You actually are in one of my favorite movies, Casino. You play yourself. You're the lawyer.
I starred with Robert De Niro.
You're the lawyer for Robert De Niro's character, Ace Rothstein, and for Joe Pesci's character, Nicky Santoro. You represented supposedly the real life basis for both of those guys.
Yes, Frank Rosenthal and Tony Spilotro.
What were Tony Spilotro, who was the Joe Pesci character, and Lefty Rosenthal, who was the Robert De Niro character, were the depictions of them in the film close to the mark?
I think the film was a real slice of life, and it was very accurate at that slice of life. It will never happen again. It can't happen again because of the nature of the gaming industry and the regulation and the like. But it was very, very good. I think they took some literary license as far as the characters were concerned. The Rothstein character was almost right to the T. The Spilotro, Santoro character, I never saw that side of Tony Spilotro. I represented him for years and years. I represented him on murder cases, and I represented him on racketeering cases. Never spent a day in jail while I was his lawyer.
Incredible.
Well, it wasn't incredible. It just was he wasn't convicted of anything, and it always bugged me when people say he killed 26 people, and I'd say
acquitted.
I'm saying to the FBI agent who's saying that I am 666 and the Dark Prince and all that kind of crap. I'm saying to him, wait a second. Your job was to put him behind bars. What were you doing for all these years? I like this interview because you're a guy who knows what he's talking about. What's worse is the witness protection program. Because here's
easy money.
Easy money. Wait a second. Here are the guys who readily admit, as rats, as informants, when they're testifying that they killed 4 people, they killed 8 people, they killed 10 people, but the government was using them to testify against a defendant on trial. And as part of their reward for spewing out this garbage, the government set them up with a witness protection program. Now, what that meant is that they put these people in a spot where they could be your next door neighbor, and they don't tell you that the guy admitted to killing 4, 8, 10, 12 people, and he's living next door to you.
I know I said this was good. That was my last question about your prior cases, and I know you have a lot to do as the first man, but I have to ask you to mention, since you mentioned that, you're cross-examining one of these rats, and he claims that your client had murdered someone.
Yes.
And you called as a surprise witness who?
Well, this is a very important case. It was, there's always a case of the century.
Right.
This was the case of the century at the time. I represented Jimmy Chagra, who was charged with the assassination of a federal judge down in Texas, and the supposed trigger man was Woody Harrelson's dad. And they brought in the rat of rats. This guy, they ultimately paid him $500,000, excused him from murdering prison guards while he was in custody. By shoving broomsticks into the orifices of the guards. I mean, this is a bad, bad guy. And he made up a story that my client said he killed the judge, and my client said that he killed a fellow by the name of Finney in a marijuana transaction out in the desert, and he put the bullets into a body, and he kept on repeating this and repeating it, and the jury, they couldn't look at my client. I mean, look at this.
Yeah, who would?
They couldn't look at him. Well, I put on a 9-minute defense. I put the guy back on the stand. I said, I want to make sure that when my client said he killed the judge to you, he said in the same tone, with the same inflection as he said he killed Mr. Finney. Absolutely. I said, and you were absolutely positively convinced that he was telling you the truth, correct? Correct. Judge turns to the prosecutor, says, any questions? Prosecutor doesn't know what I'm doing. It looks like I'm putting another nail in my client's coffin. I said, I just have one more witness, and I turned around and I said, Paul Finney.
The person
who's supposedly dead in the desert. And he walks up. The jury is looking at the prosecutor with now the look of disgust went from my client over to the prosecution table. And I said to him, how do you feel? He said, fine. I said, when my client shot, he didn't shoot me. I never had a beef about your client at all, and the jury came back with a not guilty.
It's incredible, and nothing happens to these rats,
Nothing.
even though they're caught repeatedly lying.
No, this guy got a pass, as I understand it, from the governor of New Mexico.
It's incredible.
Not to be prosecuted for the murders.
So you had what I imagine was an incredibly lucrative criminal defense practice, and you weren't just representing mobsters. You represented Mike Tyson, Don King. You represented a host.
Federal judge in impeachment proceedings.
Judge Harry Claiborne, the first federal judge impeached in maybe ever, but certainly in 50 years. You were the top echelon of criminal defense attorneys in the whole country. And yet you decide you'd had enough. How come?
It became repetitive to me. The challenge wasn't there because, as one prosecutor said, you could drop Oscar any place out of a plane with a parachute and he's going to try the case the same way. And basically it was a formula because I did go after their misconduct. And one day I just said, I want to do something. Life's short. My wife always had a saying. She gets out of bed in the morning. She says, "Carpe diem," seize the day. And I felt that I wasn't liking myself because I would go down to my office and just charge as much as I felt that anybody could ever pay. And it became a contest with myself. How much can I charge a client? That's not why I wanted to be a lawyer. So I said to my wife and children, I said, I got to do something different. They said, "What do you have in mind, Dad?" I said, "I think I'd like to run for mayor," and that's how it all started.
You say that at the time that you made this decision, you had no idea what a mayor did. You were not considered...
Never read a book on a mayor, never was in politics. I just went in cold.
There were upwards of a dozen candidates running at the time.
I think there were, yes.
And you are able to win. You've placed in the top two in the first round and then win the runoff. They initially had a 2-term limit in Las Vegas. They amended it to allow you to serve a 3rd term, as I understand.
I'm not even sure of that, but I was limited to 3 terms. I know that.
So how were you able, as a political novice, as somebody very outspoken, as somebody who had spent literally decades associating with murderers and drug dealers and quite possibly assassins.
Not associating as much as representing.
Well, okay, but in the media's eyes, you're associating.
Well, I don't consider you a member of the media.
No, I'm not.
I wouldn't be sitting with you this night, okay? They're not my darlings either, believe me.
You overcome all that and win multiple times. How did you do it?
How did I do it? Because the people knew I was telling them the truth. And as I say, it's the truth according to Oscar. I may think different than other people, but... I never lied to my constituents. I always did what I thought was right. I said what I thought was right. And I guess I was a bit of fresh air in the political scene.
Is the mayor of Las Vegas a figurehead?
No. It's a city manager form of government, which means that the manager is primarily responsible for making the decisions as far as the staff, as far as the expenditure of monies. But everything has to be approved by the council. And the mayor... there's a council of 7 people, including the mayor. The mayor needs 4 votes, including herself. She has 4 votes. It doesn't matter. She gets anything she wants on, and she turns anything she doesn't want off. So the buck stops with her.
I realize that a lot of law enforcement in Las Vegas is handled by the state and the county and the sheriff's department. But when you were mayor, did you have the opportunity to implement any sort of criminal justice or policing reforms that you had observed?
Well, what's interesting is... the first day I became the mayor, the FBI said they're moving their office from Las Vegas. They're going to move it out to one of our suburban towns, Henderson. I said, no, not on my watch. You're not. You're going to build it right in the heart of maybe the toughest section of Las Vegas at that time. And I was able to convince them to build a state-of-the-art building with all the homeland security type accoutrements. And I kept the FBI, who were my avowed enemies, in the city at the time. So that was a big deal. We established courts in our municipal court, which addressed, to me, things that were not, prior to that time, addressed. Pardon me. Such as a drug court, mental health court, veterans court, all of these things that address specific problems and issues, so you don't send somebody into the can without first trying to give them some relief so they'll be able to be a valuable member of society. And another thing that I did, which I was most proud of, in prior administrations, we have a work card law here. I'm not sure it's the best law in the world or it's constitutional. I can't tell you that. But if somebody has a problem with the law and they apply for a job, They have to get a work card in certain industries, a car dealer, a locksmith. There's particular industries where it's necessary for them to get this work card. And if they had a prior criminal record, the sheriff would deny the work card. And it was an automatic. These people couldn't go to work. They couldn't go to work as a clerk in a 7-Eleven or Stop and Go. I'm saying this makes no sense at all. So I called the sheriff in. I said, not under my watch. If an employer says that they are aware of what the conviction is, and they're willing to take the heat with whatever license they have or permit they have to be in business, and they want to hire this person, I'm going to move that this person be hired. And we establish that practice so people have valuable lives and are able to make a contribution.
You were elected as a Democrat, but
no, it was nonpartisan.
Oh, it's a nonpartisan election.
Yeah, but I was a registered Democrat. I came out to Las Vegas. Carolyn and myself both were Republicans. Richard Bryan, who subsequently became a United States Senator and our governor here, he was in my law office. And Richard was running for, I think, state assembly at the time. And he said, Oscar, the only election that really means anything is the Democratic primary here, because that's the nature of the demographic. And would you please change your party and vote for me? I was not ideologue as far as the party was concerned. We changed parties. We remained Democrats forever. And then one day when I'm the mayor, Carolyn says, you know, all these people come before you. You treat everybody the way you treat them. And I try to treat people right. And she said, but there's this feeling that if somebody's an R or a D, they're going to get some preference. I think you should be a nonpartisan. Not an independent, that's a different party. That's a party in and of itself. And we went nonpartisan, and I feel great being a nonpartisan because I always did what I wanted to do. I always did it without even hesitating. But now I think it's a label that's a good label for somebody who's in office.
I tell you, and I'm a lifelong political independent as well. Over the years I've been associated with various third parties, but neither of the two major parties. But I know how difficult it is for any sort of a nonpartisan candidate to gain traction on a statewide election, a national election. And you, in my view, would be such a perfect independent with a small I candidate for larger office, either the U.S. Senate, which I know you were considering, or governor or president. Why is it the success that you had in Las Vegas, your style, which you saw how the public just soaked it up, they loved it, even if the media at times didn't? Why wouldn't you consider running for higher office?
You know, it's a good question, and sometimes I think maybe I should have, but as corny as it sounds, I love Las Vegas. I love this town. And I wouldn't want to live anyplace else. Spent a couple of weeks back in Washington representing Judge Claiborne. Nice town, not my kind of place. Spent a couple of weeks up in the Carson City area, which is where our state capital is, representing a client in a very difficult case. I said to the judge, who wanted to give my client 15 million years, I walked in while the jury's deliberating. I said, Your Honor, I said, give my client probation if he's found guilty, because I've already done his time up here. There's not enough gin in Carson City to keep me. Forget about it. I would drink the place dry in 2 days.
That leads me to, and I'll let you go. I've already taken up way too much of your time, and I appreciate this. But that leads me to my next question. You and I both share a fondness for Bombay Sapphire Gin. And you were very honest when a group of elementary school students asked you what you would bring to a desert island. If you could bring only one item, you said a bottle of gin. And the media tried to spin it as if you were trying to encourage youth drinking.
Yeah, is that stupid?
It's ridiculous. I said on the radio maybe about 6 months ago, that I enjoy drinking alcohol. I'm not going to shy away from that or pretend that I don't.
Right, just don't drink and drive.
And I was inundated with emails, with Facebook messages, with tweets from the public who says, I can't believe that you would say that. You're such a poor example. Are you, especially as a public official, being a poor example by being so open about
Let's put it this way,
alcohol?
okay? My present position as the brand of Las Vegas is being the chairman of a permanent host committee with the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. And every morning, about 7 o'clock, I meet two showgirls. Here in my, don't laugh, this is the truth. Meet two showgirls, and we go to a various casino or place in town where I welcome the guests, and I tell them how much we appreciate their business. And when I walk in, they hand me my glass of Bombay Sapphire with a jalapeno in it. All right? Someplace could be 2 glasses.
I've always tried it with a twist. I've never tried it with
the jalapeno's the greatest.
But your restaurant, they serve it with a jalapeno.
Oscar's Beef, Booze, and Broads, you bet.
I'm going to check it out while I'm in town.
Absolutely. Go down and say you wanted the way Oscar has it. Oscar's Beef, Booze, and Broads, right downtown at the Plaza.
The other controversy that you had was a little bit more significant than just alcohol, and that dealt with going head-to-head with President Obama. President Obama twice went out of his way to insult Las Vegas, once in the context of corporate bailouts, another completely unrelated manner in how the federal government spent money. Tell me about your view of President Obama generally and the reaction to your criticism.
Look, I respect the office of the presidency. I think he has this thing about Las Vegas because he's fine when he's on the monitors. But as soon as he's off the monitors, Vegas creeps into his mind. He tells people not to come to Las Vegas, not to waste their children's education funds gambling in Las Vegas. And I took issue with him. I said, look, Las Vegas is a great place to come to. You could have business meetings here. You have serious discussions here. And then at the end of the day, you have a good time. What's wrong with that? That's what America's all about.
And he could have said that about
Atlantic
Atlantic
That's all I
City,
asked him to do.
Bethlehem?
Well, he could have said that you shouldn't drink orange juice in Florida.
Right.
Or don't drive a Ford in Detroit. I don't know why he did it. And, it's not my place to ask a president of the United States for an apology, but I did ask for a retraction and a correction, and he refused to give it to us. And I refused to meet him at the airport. As silly as that may sound, I wanted him to know that the people of Las Vegas were very upset about what he said, and we lost about 400 meetings. I can't tell you empirically that it was a result of that, but anecdotally, right afterwards, 400 meetings canceled.
While you were mayor, there was a law or an understanding that every movie that was filmed here had to have you in it.
Well, that was my law.
Right.
People, they take me seriously here, but what I said to our permitting department, I said, if anyone's going to make a movie while I'm the mayor, you have to tell them that Oscar has to have a part.
4 final lightning round questions. One, the RICO Act. Is it at all constitutional in your view?
Well, it's been upheld as being constitutional. I had the first RICO case in the country, United States versus Elliott, down in Macon, Georgia.
1980?
Well, I think way before that.
Uh-huh.
Way before that. And it's a catch-all. It's like conspiracy. It's ill-defined. It's almost a dragnet type statute. And it's abused, in my opinion, for instance, in the cases I was involved in Philadelphia, where I was representing one of the defendants in the Scarfo supposed crime family, and we went to trial on a drug case that had they been convicted, there would have been a lot of life sentences. We got a not guilty. Then there was a murder case, and this was the killing of the Testa, young man, Chicken Man Testa's son, and we got a not guilty. Well, the federal government turns around, they get an indictment charging the drug allegations and the murder allegations, and they're finally, they got 3 shots. They were lucky, one of them stuck, and they gave horrendous sentences out to those who were convicted.
I just want to reiterate what you're saying. You had clients, and I've seen this in New York, and I've covered these cases. They were charged with a crime,
right. Where's double
acquitted,
jeopardy? There's no double
and
jeopardy.
then they're charged federally with the same
with a new
incident.
label. With a new label.
It's amazing.
Well, to me, it just did away with the double jeopardy clause.
Yeah, right. Again, lightning round. Your martinis. I know you said you'll have them with a jalapeno. Shaken or stirred?
Doesn't matter. What I do is I run home and I take the bottle and I get my little glass out and I throw it in there and I put a little ice in there and I put my jalapeno in there and it's down the gullet.
So you'll do it on the rocks. Not straight up.
I'll do it anyway cold.
What is the best bet a gambler can make? A lot of people say it's blackjack. A lot of people say it's craps.
That's the easiest question that you asked me. It's the only question that I can answer with certainty. Give me a call, find out who I'm betting on, and bet the other side.
Finally, If our listeners are considering coming to Las Vegas, what is the one attraction they should definitely see that might not be first on their list? They may not have heard about.
They may not have heard about
underrated.
it, but it's unique to Las Vegas. Las Vegas is the only place that could really have something like that, and it's what we call the Mob Museum. It's the Museum of Organized Crime and Law Enforcement, the National Museum of Organized Crime and Law Enforcement. Phenomenal. It's not a gimmick. It's the real McCoy. The president of the board, this is a brilliant move on my part, is the former head of the FBI here. She's a very respected person, has been able to get us an awful lot of memorabilia from the FBI Hoover building that's here. We've got the Anastasia seat where he was killed in the barber shop. We've got the wall from the St. Valentine's Massacre with blood and all with the bullets, and we have those kind of wonderful exhibitories that people can't see anyplace else. So the Mob Museum is the place to go.
And then if you had to pick something, I know maybe your present position precludes you from saying, but if you had to pick one Vegas attraction that everybody talks about that maybe is a little overrated, what would you tell people? It's not worth the line, not worth the wait.
A venue like that wouldn't last 2 seconds here.
Really? Well, I am going to check out that Mob Museum. Mr. Mayor, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this.
You may be the only legitimate guy in the media who could ask a decent question. No, that's not true. I'm friendly with guys, Chris Matthews, O'Reilly, Wolf Blitzer. They're all very, very nice to me. Oh, I sounded like Trump again. They're nice. They're very nice men.
Well, you're very kind. I hope we can do it again.
Anytime.
Thank you. If you want to comment on any portion of my interview with former Las Vegas Mayor Oscar Goodman and the current First Man, you can give me a call at 877-970-2999. That's 877-970-2999. This is Frank Morano on AM 970. The Answer.